Good evening and welcome to About the Valley. And my guest tonight is Kevin Klyberg. And Kevin is a representative, well, actually works for, he's a park
I
ranger,
am a I am a park ranger
yeah,
indeed. Yeah.
with the National Park Service.
Good to be here, Harry, as always. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for inviting me out tonight.
And we want to talk about the bylaw that is coming up on October 22nd at the second annual town meeting. I hate saying second annual, it doesn't make sense. Should say semi-annual town meeting. That sounds better. But anyway, it's Article 7, and it concerns a local historic zone. But for us, it's really a boundary for the Park Service.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to get into.
Sure, of
People don't
course.
understand. Why do we need to do this, Kevin?
All right. So let's go back a little bit how this all started because the vote's coming up soon. Believe it or not, this is an idea that's been kicking around since 2006.
Oh my God.
I was actually at the first meeting back in December of 2006, and what happened is in that year,
15 years now.
pushing it, yeah. In that year, Congress passed a bill, and what that bill did is it expanded or it extended the Blackstone Heritage Corridor for 5 more years, and they said, should there be a national park in the Blackstone Valley? And so what they tasked the Park Service to do, and one of the things I was working on for a while there was, you had to do something that's called a special resource study. And what that is you look at, should there be a park in an area? And what you look at are a couple things. One is there a nationally significant story? Well, in the Blackstone Valley, there's no question. There's a nationally significant story here of the Industrial Revolution. And then you have to look at, are there resources to tell that story? So for example, if there was no mill left in Whitensville and the mill houses were gone, you'd be like, well, that's not the best place to tell that story.
Right.
But of course, they are still here. And so we have this great story. We have the resources, and then finally we were able to say, yes, we should do a park here. And so at that study suggested that there be a park here in the Blackstone River Valley, and that there were going to be 6 sites in that park. And so it's the Slater Mill down in Pawtucket, of course,
Yeah.
the flagship site, the
Right.
start of it all. If you don't have Slater Mill,
Yeah.
why are we doing this? And then there's the mill villages of Ashton and Slatersville in Rhode Island. There's also a state park in Lincoln, Rhode Island, which is the original site or the first site of where the Ashton Mill Village was. So it's actually 2 chapters of a story on either side of the river.
Oh,
And then up here in Massachusetts, we have Whitensville and Hopedale.
yeah.
And so, after that study came together, it was determined that of the entire Blackstone Valley, these were the 6 places that were the best places to tell that story. And so by creating this park, we're going to be looking at, the special places that are the best places that we can tell this Blackstone Valley story. And to get to where your question is so to have a park, because this is one of the other parts of what this study looks at. Well, if you're going to have a park, you have to run a park. You have to have the rules and regulations. And one of the things, it sounds so simple, so basic, but you got to have a line.
A boundary.
Exactly. You got to have a boundary. If you're going to have a park, you have to say, well, this is the park and this isn't the park. And so you have to be able to draw that line on the map, which sounds so simple and so basic, but that's what you're running into right here in town. And what's the same thing happened in Hopedale, same thing went on in Slatersville, same thing in town of Cumberland. And so the reason that we have to, in your case, what we've been looking at is having these local historic districts is, unlike maybe the more traditional national parks that folks think about, places like, say, Grand Canyon or Yellowstone.
Right, where you have government-owned land.
Exactly. We're not looking to have government-owned land in these
Right.
mill villages.
Right,
And so because the Park Service isn't going to own these places, what we've required is that there has to be some level of protection so that we can say, well, if this is a special place, what makes it special? Well, it's these buildings, it's this story. So how do we protect these buildings? And so what we've asked our local community partners to do is to establish a local historic district so that there is a level of protection over some number of buildings, some level of buildings, so that we can point to, okay, this is the spot that we're going to focus on as a place to tell this story and to, in perpetuity, serve as an example of the story. It's not going to be the entire thing. We're not looking to take over or draw a line around the entire village of Whitensville, or we're looking at a smaller district. But in the end, as we were talking about before the show, if you're going to say that some place is special, you gotta draw a line around it. You have to explain why this is, why is this the top of the mountain? Well, we're going to draw a line around and say this is the special place that we want to celebrate as part of this huge American story.
And what differentiates us if we do this from the rest of the people in the corridor?
So, this is something that comes up a ton of times. In fact, there was a meeting I just at the other day where this question was being asked, even by some of the folks in Hopedale who just went through this.
Yes.
So, the Blackstone Valley Heritage Corridor was established back in 1986. It has existed. It still exists. That line includes the entirety or parts of 25 cities and towns. So the entire town of Northbridge is within that heritage corridor,
Right.
as are all the other neighboring towns here. Now, the difference with the heritage corridor, there's a couple things there. One is that they cannot own any land.
Right.
The Park Service can, or the park could. We're not looking to in Whitensville, but it's legally an option at least.
Right.
But the other thing is that heritage corridors have a lower level of I'll say qualification. When we were looking, again, with this special resource study, this was one of the questions that came up, because some folks were saying, well, why don't you just make the entire corridor a park? And there's two reasons why that's not going to happen, or it would have been ridiculous. One is you can't turn, 600 square miles with 500,000 people living in it into a park.
Right.
It's just not feasible. And the other thing is that not everything in Northbridge, for example, is part of our story. I mean, it's a lovely town, but
You don't need every part to tell the story.
Right. So one of the things that we looked at was to set up this park area was the idea of setting up using the National Historic Landmark level of qualification, which is, as you might imagine, an extremely high level that has to be reached. So, for example, the Slater Mill has been a National Historic Landmark for, I think it was in the late 1960s, so it's about 50 years now. So that one was already there. So with our other local communities, it's, well, how do you reach that standard? And one of the things that's there is you have to have levels of protection. As it turned out, the one village in the town of Cumberland Ashton Village had already established a local historic district back in the 1980s, so that one was done. So that left the three other communities. So it was the town of North Smithfield with the village of Slatersville, you folks here with Whitensville and Northbridge, and then the Hopedale village and the town of Hopedale. And so each of your three communities have had to take this journey of deciding what are the sort of the crown jewels of this village? What are those core elements that really say, if I'm going to bring someone to Whitensville, what's that kernel? What's that piece that says, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And, it's similar to, if you're going to take somebody to Gettysburg, there was obviously dozens of battles in the Civil War that aren't national parks, but here's a place that touches America's soul. But if the big Round Top, Little Round Top weren't part of Gettysburg, then what's the point?
Yes.
And
So you designate those particular areas.
You designate those places that are part of that story.
Right.
And so again, it's not just looking at this the whole landscape, and we do want to talk about be able to talk, and we will be able to talk about the whole landscape. But again, it's that focusing on what's that piece that needs to be protected by the local community.
Well, what the community did over a number of years is it hadn't changed.
Right.
So that's one of the things that really appealed.
Right. Absolutely.
There have been no change other than adding some monuments. There have been no changes, and it makes for a nice walking area. So it's very compact, and that's what we came up with. That's what we looked at. How do we do this as a study committee? What do we come up with for boundaries that make sense, that are easy assessed with access, and doesn't put a burden on any of the property owners. And so we came up with a bylaw that has very, very few restrictions, if any. In fact, we have 26 exemptions. And on top of that, we only look at the facade, the front of the building. We don't look at what goes on in the back, on the sides, on the roof, or anything else. We just look at the front of the building, because that can tell a story. And you can say how the Whitens built this machine shop over here, which is not part of it, but it's still there. But they built the town hall, they started in the Little Red Mill, they built the cotton mill, they built the bank to do their financial transactions, everything. They built the library, they built the community center,
Right.
they built the town common.
Right, and the story that you just told is exactly why Whitensville was one of the places that made it to that final cut. Because when we look at, so let's take a step back. One of the questions that got asked us when we were doing this is, okay, we've already got a park in Lowell that talks about mills.
Yes.
What do we need another park for? And one of the things that we really want to look at here is the story of the Blackstone Valley is not just about mills, it's about the mill village. And so we're looking at what we call those Rhode Island system of mill villages. And so, when one of the ideas that was proposed is, well, why isn't it just Slater Mill? Because in some ways that makes a lot of sense that's the spot. But that misses at least half, if not 2/3 of the story, because it's not just about the mill. The mill is obviously a centerpiece.
Right.
But what literally makes that story come to life are the people.
Yes.
And if you aren't able to have a mill, but then turn and see, and that's where those people lived. That's where they went to church. That's where they went to school. And oh, look, here's the stores that they shopped in. The story of Whitensville is the story of the people who have lived here for 200 years, and that mill is the centerpiece of it. But we really need to look at a community and how it was built around it. And in so many ways, the fact that, Whitensville is still a vibrant and successful community 2 centuries after they built it really says something about just what the Whitens built here. Because it could have become a ghost town when the mill shut down, but no,
Right.
They had built a community successfully that people still want to live in, that people still find attractive, that people still want to buy homes in, because it's such a beautiful place. So it's a success as a community, not just as an industrial structure.
Well, the major difference between Lowell and the Whitensville, Lowell was what you might call the first industrial park. And yeah, he brought the farm girls in, and he took care of them to operate his mills. But what the Whitens did is they made it more like they brought people in, not just the farm girls, but they brought
Entire families, yeah.
entire families that gave them housing and gave them a store to shop at, things like that, and paid them through the mill. But it's different. He brought whole families in.
Exactly.
And became a paternal order too.
Yes, absolutely.
So they oversaw. I mean, there was always someone from the Whiten from the family on the Board of Selectmen.
Right, and that was another part we were making with, why is the Blackstone Valley story different or important along with the Lowell story? Because the Lowell story, while it's fantastic,
Yep.
that's the anomaly. That's the one that's different, because it's not too often that someone's going to come in and just throw tons of money at something. What we
Right.
see in the Blackstone Valley is that much more common starting small,
Yes.
growing big.
Growing over the years.
Exactly. And when you think about what happened here in Whitensville, it is literally this classic American story of small, couple of guys, some family relationships there. They have this small mill. And what happens? In the little basement machine shop, you get the smart kid who's down there and happens to build a machine that's just better than whatever else is on the market.
Yes.
He wasn't looking to say, hey, I'm going to start the Whiten machine shop here and become the world's biggest manufacturer of spinning machines. He's just trying to make a machine that's working. He's probably fixing something that's broken,
Right.
and tooling around, and he gets this thing, and it obviously explodes and becomes this literally a global industry centered right here. But that's a much more common American story, and so that's one of the things we're celebrating. And I'm so glad you mentioned the fact about bringing the families here, because again, when we're looking at Whitensville, one of those exciting stories to tell is, all those different families coming in from all around the world.
Yeah, different countries.
Yes, such a rich tapestry. And again, that's a story that we see around the entire Blackstone Valley. But when we were picking, okay, what are the superstars? Again, Whitensville checked off so many boxes because, oh, it has a machine story, it has a mill story. Again, actually, Whitensville again. Oh, look at that. There's the cotton mill next to the machine shop, and so we have these two different stories, obviously related both by family and both by industry. But you have the tool industry over here, the cotton spinning still going on right across the street. Different mill housing. There's a story there to say, if you lived in Whitensville, what was it like to be a cotton worker versus being a machine worker? And that's a story to look
Right.
at. And then, as the mill is growing, you look at, as the machine shop is expanding, well, then this neighborhood gets built, and then this neighborhood gets built, and now we have to go around, up at Arcade Pond. Well, I built all these houses. Who's going to fill them? Now I have to go to Canada. Now I have to bring in, folks from the Ukraine. Now I'm bringing in people from all around the world
Right.
to come here. And it's such a wonderful story. And that's the story that we get to tell here. And so it's one of the reasons why, as a park ranger, it's always great to come here, because it's such a rich tapestry.
Before they get scared, we're not gonna redo the whole town or encompass
right.
the whole town. But we only need a small boundary to get to get everything going here and be able to tell the story. And all the Park Service wants is a small boundary that we commit to. And then after that, if people come here, they can drive through and they'll be able to see all this.
Right. So, and again, just to make it clear, the Park Service isn't looking to own anything here.
Right.
And just because this is a question, not that you've asked, but other folks have asked over the years, it's actually in the legislation. The Park Service can't take anything by eminent domain.
Yep.
So I just want to take that one right off the table. But, as the Park Service, we have been, given the trust of taking care of, again, America's crown jewels. And so there are certain standards that have to be there for being a national park. And again, because we're not going to have the direct ownership in this case where we would say, oh, well, we're going to set these rules and it's our building. Nope. It's still going to be either owned by the town in many cases of the buildings you're talking about, or whether it's in private ownership. But it's that there has to be those levels of protection, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to say, well, okay, well, this is going to be a park, because the whole idea, and I guess maybe the best way to explain it is we talk about how in the Park Service we're in the forever business. It's not about what's Whitensville going to look like in 2 years. It's if someone comes here from Kansas 100 years from now looking to find out about the Blackstone Valley, are they still going to be able to get that sense when they come here to Whitensville?
Right. And I don't see that the area we encompass changing in any way. Why would it? It hadn't changed for 100 years now.
Yeah, and you're right. That's one of the things. It's one of the things. That,
But if there is something that took place, and we'll say the bank building burnt to the ground, okay, and they didn't want to rebuild it to what it was, well, we could eliminate it there. We could take it out of it. Not that we want it to happen,
right.
But I'm just saying, I got to take the fear out of people thinking that they're going to be committed to this forever and ever. We're committing to this boundary, but it can be changed if it had to be.
So, and actually, it's a good thing to make clear. So, one of these things is, and we discussed it before, let's make clear, I'm not a resident of the town of Northbridge. I will not be voting. This is your choice. And I think that's actually, if nothing else, this is a great civics lesson for everyone to determine. How do you want your town story to be preserved? The district that is created will be up to the people of Northbridge. And so, that's one of the things which was also important to us as the Park Service is, and Harry can confirm it, we didn't draw the line.
Right.
We didn't come in. Now, when we first started out, I will say, because we had to begin with something, we said in our original study, we mentioned the National Register District of Whitensville, which is quite a sizable,
Yes.
covers a lot. But we also, it was in the legislation that was written that adjustments to the boundary could be made by being, besides these local decisions being made, but it wouldn't take another act of Congress. They could be published in the National Register because our congressional delegation realized that this was going to be flexible. There's going to be some changes that are going to be made, and these districts are going to have to be created so as to not have to have it be re-voted on in Congress, because it took 3.5 years the first time, that the local communities would have the ability to create their own districts to have that role. And so, that's where, myself, other folks working with the Park Service, we're here to answer questions, tell you, why we're asking you to do these things. But in the end, it's up to the folks in the community.
Yes.
And so, and I think that's actually fantastic, because as a historian, to see folks like yourself, Harry, and other people here in the community to step up and to make this decision. Hey, you know what? We here in town decide that this is something that we want to be part of, and that this is important. And I think it's also fantastic because so often decisions like this are made in Boston or Washington or whatever.
Right.
And here's something that the folks right here in town have a chance to determine that they're going to be part of one of America's crown jewels.
Yeah, you can't call it big government. This is very small government. It's being done right here at the local level.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's something that we think is very exciting, and we're certainly looking forward to having Whitensville as part of the park.
Now, what I want to get, one question I get from a lot of people.
Sure.
And of course, everybody thinks, what's in it for Northbridge? What's Northbridge going to get out of this? And it was stated in the beginning back, our former town manager said told the selectmen it was a good deal because there's a possibility of grants in the future, because we would then be part of the national park system.
So, when the different communities become part of the parks, and again, these are long-term processes, so I want to say it's not like the checkbook shows up tomorrow.
Right.
But so what it means is that as this becomes part of the park, there'll be a planning process, and so we'll be looking at, so for example, okay, if this is now part of the park, how are we going to tell the story here? These are the resources that the community has decided are going to be voted in. So, are we looking at things like walking tours and signage and other things like that?
Right.
And I will be clear, for publicly owned buildings, not any privately owned buildings, but for publicly owned buildings, there can be opportunities for funding from the government, and that could be for, I don't know, repairs, different things. Maybe it's something, for example, if we said, hey, if we're going to be doing walking tours in the community, are we going to work with the town of Northbridge about, we need another cross light because there's a spot we want to cross to for
Right,
a walking
right.
tour. Can we work with you on putting in a crosswalk or
Yeah.
a sidewalk repair, things like that, if it's part of the taking tours to the community. And I don't know what all these things could be. So
But
I mean,
the opportunity
those are some of the opportunities
and
that
again-
might be out there. Yeah.
Again, as emphasized, we would be part of the national park.
Correct.
Everyone's part of the corridor
Here in the Blackstone Valley.
in the
Yeah.
Blackstone Valley, but this singles out us as part of the park,
Correct. Which is a different level.
different
of,
levels, so we're at a higher level.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there's.
Grafton's not gonna be part of it, Uxbridge's not gonna be part of it, we are.
And it's not even, it's Whitensville versus Riverdale Rockdale.
Yeah,
I mean,
actually, it's the village of Whitensville itself, yes.
And so I mean, and to be clear, we does say in the legislation, it's. I'm here at Rockdale right now, so it's not like they put a choke collar on me. But and it is in our legislation that the rangers can go out, and we do go out around the other communities as well. But to be honest, there are limited funds, there are limited staffing,
Right.
and our main focuses will be upon those areas in the park.
Yes.
And so those are the places where we'd be looking to make investments, whether it's, having rangers, putting in signs, working with the community on these different things. We're going to be focused on the park because that's
That's
our job.
yeah.
I have been hired to be a steward of the national park, and so our focus is on those areas within the boundary. And so that's A, why we have to have a boundary, and then B, what it means is being inside or outside the line, is what we're going to be focusing
Now,
on.
the Park Service does marketing on a national, international basis.
I have to be careful there because we don't do marketing.
Oh.
The government never markets.
Okay.
But we do have
Promotions?
we have promotional material.
Yes. And
But yeah, so for example, we have our park with you've probably seen them, the maps with the black band on
Yes.
top. They're called unigrids. I'll throw a little bit of Park Service gibberish at you. So yeah, when we publish the map, Whitensville will be on the map
Would be a featured place
inside
on
the
the map.
line, and
Yes.
and one of the places that we're talking about. And so, or when we have our signs and where to come, it would be one of the places that we come
right,
to.
so this will bring tourism in. Because
Right,
there
so-
are people that travel the country to go to historic parks.
Correct. Yep. And you see people come into the different places to visit, and they'll come in to get their passport stamped, or and come and see the rangers. And so again, that's
When I did my tour, which was in the Go Book, and I didn't expect a big turnout, but I ended up with a little over half a dozen people, and 3 of them were from out of town. One from Boston, one from Attleboro.
yeah.
And in fact, the man from Attleboro said, I'd like to be able to do something like this in my community.
Well, and this is one of the things where I have to remind folks, even you right now, Harry, is thinking bigger. So, for example, I got a call last night or yesterday afternoon, whatever it was, from someone from Washington State who is coming to New England for the foliage season, and they're going to be here this weekend and wanted to know about the park. And where should they go, and where would the ranger be? Where can they get a junior ranger badge? Or where can they? And so
There you
so
go.
that's the kind of thing. And that's one of the things I think, because I grew up in the Blackstone Valley. I grew up in Lincoln. This is my home as well
Yeah.
too. And I have to remind myself the idea that it's not just this isn't just a Northbridge story. This is an American story that
Yes.
people are interested in.
Birthplace of the American
That's
Industrial Revolution. And we take this call here. Go ahead, caller, you're on.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, you're on, Barry.
Hey, I'd like to thank you for taking my phone call. And as you know, President Roosevelt said during his term during World War II that there's nothing like the spirit or heart of a volunteer. So I'd like to thank you, Harry, and your committee on all the, the hard work that you've done on this endeavor so far. But the questions that I've been getting is, some people have looked at I don't know if the park ranger is familiar with the proposed contract between the town and the National Park Service, and some people have looked at it and gave me a few calls, and they said that they can't find anything in that contract that specifies that, that people's property have to be put under certain private restrictions. Do you know where that would say that in the contract, or where are these private restrictions on the private properties coming from, Harry?
Well, I'll let Kevin handle that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because whether you're talking about, because we have, and again, this is all this government gibberish. So there's a cooperative agreement with the town, and there's also the legislation itself. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, of course, the legislation is about a page or a page and a half, and so it often refers back to other things. One of the things it refers to is the special resource study, which is a much longer document. I'm not sure which document you're talking about, but I'd be glad, if folks want to give me a call.
The agreement that town signed.
So the cooperative agreement.
Cooperative
yeah.
agreement.
Right.
So without having it in front of me, I mean, again, it's
It requires a boundary.
It requires a boundary, and so for us to set a boundary, there have to be these regulations. And this is what we've come up with the idea, as opposed to us of us owning it. So without it having in front of me, I don't want to misquote anything.
Right.
So I'm not sure what it is they're finding or not
Well,
finding.
let me put it this way: could the town have this local historic district without imposing restrictions on the property owners? Like if you don't do if you fall within certain outside those restrictions, there's a fine up to potentially $300 a day, or $9,300 a month, or up to $116,000 a year.
Barry,
Saying is that could you have this agreement without imposing those restrictions on the private property owners?
So
basically we've got 26 exemptions.
Mm-hmm.
So how many restrictions are there? It's very limited.
Right, but I'm saying, could you have it without putting any restrictions on?
Let me answer. I'll give the answer that I have. So part of it comes with, because we're looking for a local historic district, the regulations that are in place are from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not from the federal government. And so if you're going to have a local historic district, you have to follow the state's regulations on that. And so, for example, the regulations that you have here in Whitensville are going to be slightly different from what they are for the Rhode Island communities, because of what those local jurisdictions are. At some point, and I know this is what folks are arguing about locally, and you're fine-tuning it down to whatever. At some point, though, there has to be some regulation, or else there's nothing there.
Right.
And again, I have to make it clear, I'm not telling folks to vote one way or the other. I have to be very careful about that, so I just want to make that, and I'm not trying to not answer a question here, so I just want to make sure I'm not trying to sway anybody's vote here. But, one of the things that we're looking at with the Park Service is, if we're not going to own it, there needs to be some level of protection of these sites. And I understand people aren't comfortable allowing to have, whether it's the local government, state government, or in my case, the federal government, having these regulations on their privately owned homes. I totally understand that. And I understand why people could be opposed to this. At the end, it's, if this is something that people wish to value about their community, then this is something which they, that this is what is required for it to be part of the park. At some point, if a district isn't formed, then Whitensville won't be in the park. And that's too bad. I would say, I'll say this, we'll move on. Because the other communities are ready to go. And so, and we've discussed it before, if it were to happen later, Whitensville, we're not slamming the door shut, but the park will, if the other places are ready to go and the other boundaries or lines are ready to be drawn, we'll move on. And so if the people of Whitensville aren't interested, then you won't see me around here as much anymore, and we'll be spending our time in the other communities.
Right. So as you explained, you said this is a state restriction. So if it's a state restriction, why does it not? Why should the federal government? Can't the federal government just enter into a local historic district without having the state restriction?
Because there is no such thing. There is no such thing as a federal local historic district regulation. There isn't anything that we could do that just doesn't exist. It's always been done at a state level.
Barry, we put so much exemptions in that we didn't think Mass Historic would accept it. And they did, but they were reluctant about it. They weren't happy with it. They sent a letter back saying, we'd like you to put more restrictions.
Well, they want you to put more in?
because we didn't put hardly any in.
Wow.
We got almost none in there.
Right, but they want you to put more in.
No, they said they would have liked to seen more,
They would like to see more.
but they accepted it.
Oh, could you do it without any?
No, you can't, that's totally impossible.
Mhm.
But we don't restrict the color paint, we don't restrict the type of roof, we don't restrict air conditioners, satellite dishes, or, I mean, I haven't got the list in front of me, but it's 26 items we took off.
Mm-hmm.
We don't restrict garages, we don't restrict, we only look at the facade, the front of the building.
So these restrictions are coming from the state.
No. We put what we could, we set up the bylaw.
Okay.
They would have liked to have it a lot more restrictive.
Okay, so I mean, was there like certain requirements that they required?
No, they don't tell you what they require.
Oh, okay.
You make that decision.
So if you had said we didn't want any restrictions,
Well, you have to have something,
you have to have something.
yes. So we made it as little restrictive as possible. We're talking about the facade only,
Mm-hmm.
not the side, not either side or the back of the building. Only what you see from the street.
Now I talked to somebody on the FinCom, Harry, and they said that they're already in some type of a historic district that was established in 1983.
Yes, but that's not the same.
So what? Now, why is that a different district?
Because what the Park Service wanted was something within zoning.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a boundary. You have, okay, this street, that street, it's set up by boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You have a map, and the map is bound out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you follow me?
Right. So now I heard at the selectmen's meeting the other night. I think a couple of selectmen said that if these private property owners didn't want to be in it, they didn't have to be in it. Was that a correct statement?
Well, no, I don't know if that's really correct. I mean, it wouldn't have what we set up was everything is contiguous.
Mm-hmm.
So if they weren't in it, then it wouldn't be contiguous.
Mm-hmm.
But we did hear from the people that are in it, the private properties, we have letters from them stating they have no problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
That they're more than they're welcoming this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are already under historic restrictions because they gotten grants to do up, to fix the place up and things like that. And so they're already under historic restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're trying to say. Like,
Right. But I thought a couple of selectmen said that if they didn't want to be in it, they didn't have to be in it or something.
No, I don't remember that.
Oh, okay. I thought that's what a couple of them said.
But I don't know if they talked to, it may have said that they were talking to them, I don't know. All I know is that we presented it, and we talked with the owners of all the properties.
Mm-hmm.
As, the town properties with the selectmen we talked with. We talked with Dennis Rice. We talked with the owners of the cotton mill. We talked with the, Vinnie Osterman, who owns the bank building. We talked with the community center.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them had a problem with it.
Now I know the park ranger may not be familiar with the agreement, but I know the last section of it. I believe it's Article 7, and it basically indemnifies the National Park Service from any liability. And I was wondering, should the private property owners get some type of an opinion from town council if they should increase their property liability insurance on their property?
Why would you?
Or is that up to the property owners? I mean, because the National Park Service is going to be indemnified, and the town is protected by municipal liability limits.
I'll just clarify the one thing.
But the private property owners, who's going to protect them?
Guys, I just want to clarify the one thing, and I won't speak out for what private property owners should do. Just that in the case of the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
There's often that boilerplate language in part because like we're self-insured, we can't buy insurance. And so a lot of that indemnity goes back to what's called the Tort Claims Act, which is that if there is an issue, you have to sue the government, which of course
Right.
happens all the time. But there's a lot of times that boilerplate about the indemnity is more about the fact that there's no insurance involved. But
sure
that's a
that-
slightly different story. But just
That's probably in the agreement on the corridor as well.
Mm-hmm.
No, the thing is, no one's gonna be going onto their property.
Right. Well, I mean but you can't control if I mean, if you're not going to have a police officer there 24/7.
Well, here again,
Make
okay,
sure people
Barry,
don't go on their property.
even if you don't do this, what's to stop someone today from going on their property?
Right. But I'm saying, but the change is if they're a member of this.
They're not a member. They're not a member.
If they've opted into it, right?
They're not a member.
So they're being forced into it.
No, they're not being forced into anything.
So if they're not being forced into it, so they're not. So how are
No,
these
you
12
make it sound
property
like
owners? How did they
these-
elect to be in it?
No, the Park Service is not gonna go into these buildings to show people the inside of the building.
No.
You're looking at it from the
There's supposedly going to
street.
be a thing on the curb, right? Like a
Yeah,
chaos
well,
someday.
then there's no reason for anyone who's viewing these buildings to get off the curb.
Right, but I'm saying, that's in a perfect world. We
Well,
don't
if
know
they,
if they're going
well, if they did, then they're trespassing.
Well, I mean, that's something that maybe that probably should be afforded to these property owners some answers on that. But
Well, yeah, I tell you right now, if a tourist walks onto their property, they're trespassing because that's not what this is about.
all right,
So it's the same coverage they got right now.
but didn't you just say that these people they submitted letters that they wanted to be in this?
No, that they had no problem with it.
Oh, okay.
See, what being said is being misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
They said they had no problem with the boundary zoning that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically, if they don't want to be involved, they have to vote no at the town meeting.
Well, no, if they didn't want their properties in it. But they said they had no problem with it because it doesn't put any burden on them whatsoever.
Well, I'm just saying that maybe they should just talk it over with their, home insurance or property insurance or whatever. But I mean that's because
Well,
you're going to have people visiting the property.
They're not going to visit the properties. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. They're not visiting the properties. It's looking at the front. You can look at a building from the sidewalk. You don't have to go up to the building.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it sounded to me like they were going to be visiting the property.
No.
No,
That was never brought up.
So this is a fair question. So I've done plenty of walking tours here in Whitensville and other communities around the valley, and it's always quite clear. And this is part of the training. We always respect private property. We're on the sidewalks or in other public spaces. So, for example, taking folks into the Memorial Park, which is public
That's public
property.
area.
That's a spot where we go to. Or, for example, over the years, we've done programs. If we want to go down, take a look at one of the Red Mill. We've been in touch with the folks over at Alternatives, and we're looking to bring a group in on whatever day, and so we would talk with and again those are either public or semi-public spaces. As far as private homes.
Well, they're all private. There's only one home.
Well, let's go. But in any of the communities. So, for
Right.
example, when I've done tours before, if I'm walking down the street, I might point out, well, and there's some mill houses down the street there.
Yeah.
But certainly, we do not go on people's lawns. Since
Right.
Now, I'll say, of course, that's when you're with the ranger. If someone's coming doing their own private tour or just showing up, I would hope that they would have the common sense to stay on the
But
sidewalk.
they could do that regardless of whether it's in the historic district or not.
True. I mean, today, if someone wanted to come running across your yard, they
They can do that. Yeah.
Right. But I was just, it sounds like you're creating a special district and you're inviting people to observe certain historic
Yeah, but observe it from the sidewalk.
buildings or facilities.
Observe from the sidewalk.
Okay.
You know, it's like like a downtown being, places that dressed up their downtown with grants to make people want to come downtown to take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, that's the same thing, same concept.
Okay. Now, what will the town be getting from the National Park Service? Can you unequivocally state that we're going to be getting some grants, or is this just a possibility?
At this point in time, I can unequivocally state nothing.
Okay,
There's nothing out there right now.
Just because there's no park for me here in Whitensville to discuss. So, and more importantly, as a park ranger, I am not the person who'd be involved in signing those agreements. So, I won't even pretend to get into what those things would be exactly.
What you get out of it is you bring people into the area.
Mm-hmm.
They shop at the stores, they use the restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps business, and businesses pay taxes. We don't have them. You know, we could have a whole empty Church Street.
Right,
And nobody goes there.
but they're also in placing, even though that's these regulations on the private property are very liberal, there's still regulations being imposed on their property, right?
Yeah, but what properties, okay? Who's going to have a tough regulation? We got 12 properties. It's never going to be expanded as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So they cannot. This
Well-
district cannot be expanded by an e-vote at the town meeting or anything like that.
It can only be expanded by going through the last 18-month process that we just went through, and then a town meeting vote with 2/3 of the town meeting voting for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to justify it.
Right.
So, like I say, is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the properties we've taken are already under historic restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
So, how are we affecting them any worse?
Mm-hmm.
That's why you didn't see a lot of objection to this, because we spent a lot of time trying to make out the best possible system. We
Right,
didn't
right,
include
right.
the White Machine Works because he was concerned.
Right.
All right, so, but it's there. You can point to it.
Yeah, I know, but like I said, I know a lot of people are concerned about that. The restrictions being put on their property or whatnot, and
Well,
it's just,
I don't know who these people are, because the people we talked to weren't concerned about it.
well, that's what I've heard
The
that.
ones that are concerned are the ones who were told, and it's not true, that we would be expanding onto their property.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking to expand, okay? And believe me, you'd have a hard time finding people that would vote to expand it. We're having a hard time for people to accept the properties we got now. How would you get people to vote to expand it?
Right. Well, like I said, that's just something with people. They had some concerns. But now
But,
I
you
don't
know-
I don't know if you have this information, Harry. But if you look at that proposed agreement, there's a lot of things in there. It says what the town will do. Now, has the town manager given you any type of a cost analysis on those?
Look, that you have to
on
take.
what the town, on what it will cost to the town or anything?
I have no part of the agreement. The agreement was between the selectmen, the town manager, selectmen, and the federal government, the park system.
Okay. So that's
I'm
something
on the
we'll probably have to
local
wait.
historic. I can
mean,
talk about the local historic district because that's what I chaired.
Right.
But I have nothing to do with the agreement, and I don't know if I don't believe there's anything in there like that, but.
Right. Well, there's like 3 paragraphs of things that says what the town will do, and then there's things that says what the National Park Service will do.
Well, look,
But there's no cost analysis in the I guess it's the proposed agreement.
who
So, I mean, maybe
writes
that will
these
have to
agreements,
be
right?
the
Lawyers.
town meeting.
Well, I mean, I don't, unfortunately, I don't have the agreement with me. I mean, if you do, and you could tell me, I don't even know what the town has agreed to.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's just the certain paragraphs, and it says things that the National Park Service will do, and there's certain things that the town will do. I mean, there's a lot of things, and that the town's agreeing to do, but
Well, the town's gonna maintain their
proposed
buildings,
agreement,
isn't that a good
It doesn't say
idea?
if there's any cost associated of what the town is going to do. That
Well-
may be something we'll have to bring up at the town meeting.
I mean, absolutely, as well you should. Again, without having in front of me, I don't know if there's anything in the agreement that has a
Well, it's
a
probably
direct.
things like the town maintains the roads. I mean, are they gonna do
Yeah.
that either way?
I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of things that the town agrees that says that what they agree what they're going to do, and I mean, I know we have an excellent town accountant, so I'm confident my confidence level is high that he'll have a cost analysis for
Well,
the town
what would be
meeting
the
if,
cost? What would
there
the
is
cost
one,
be?
And then there are certain things that says what the town employees will have to do. And,
Yeah, they maintain the park. They do that now.
But this would be additional mission creep, Harry.
No,
So these are going to be all additional duties put on the people.
no, there's no duties being put on them.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but if you do, could you tell us what one of the things the town is agreeing to?
Okay, it says Okay, it says that it says the town will use best efforts to authorize that the local historic district once established be included in the proposed boundaries for the National Historic Park.
So-
Administer and manage public lands to remain under the ownership of the town within the boundaries of the public land. Seek National Park Service sites on major work. When any major projects are near the National Park Service property, that information has to be conferenced out with the National Park Service before the town does any work or anything near.
Okay, there's no National Park Service property in the area.
Well, no,
That agreement is for all over the place.
okay. Well, like I said, I mean, if hopefully, I mean, it'll be a good question. I'm sure, we have an excellent town manager. I'm sure he'll review it, and if there is any cost, I'm sure he'll have, an answer at the night of the town meeting. But I just want to make sure that, if there's any cost, that should be brought out, and if there's any mission creep on the present town employees, that just to let, to give people a full picture on the whole
No,
perspective.
they have to no more than what they're already doing.
Okay, well, it would be good to get it from the town manager that night of the town meeting,
If in that agreement, the town was gonna maintain all the properties, I'd be glad to sell that to the people that were putting their properties up, because, hey, Al, you don't have to cut your grass, the town will do
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
But that's
Harry,
not what's
you
in
don't have
there.
a copy of that agreement?
I have a copy, but the thing's about 30 pages, for crying out loud.
Right. So, I mean, if you look at it, there's like, there's 4 or 5 different sections that says certain things that the town will do.
But keep in mind, that agreement is the same agreement they use everywhere.
Right. I know it's a boilerplate issue, but I mean, I'm confident the town manager would use his due diligence and make sure that, if there is any cost, that they'll be explained to the
Well, if there's any
the
cost, we
registered
can opt
voters
out.
that night,
We can opt out at any time.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, you just want to make sure that everybody has all the information. That's why it's excellent that you're having this show tonight.
That zone could be eliminated at any time. The
Well,
same,
but then you got all these other historic district zones, like you said. Like somebody told me one was created in 1983, and then there's another, like a state historic zone too, also. So I mean, so there's still historic district zones in the town.
yeah, but not the same thing. It's
Right,
not
right,
a boundary.
Right.
It's
I'm
not
just
a
saying if we
boundary.
opted out of this, we got the other ones.
It's not a boundary, though.
Right.
That's the difference. This was required a boundary.
Right. But no, I mean, it would be interesting, and like I said, it's good to get the information out, and I'm sure a lot
Absolutely.
of things will come
No,
up at
and
town
if,
meeting.
and let me just say, as a semi-interested folk, because this is obviously your vote. I'm glad to hear that folks are actually having this discussion, because this is your town,
Right.
and so it's great that folks are having this discussion and are interested enough. While I cannot and I will not tell folks to vote one way or the other, as always, we encourage folks to show up and speak their minds and vote their minds as well, because that's what it's all about, right?
Right. This is a great republic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will say, the town meeting, that is literally democracy in action, because there's one man, one vote.
You can't get any closer.
So, hey, you know what? It's great stuff. And you know what's fun? We're going to have part of the town of Northbridge history being made here one way or the other. So it's
Right.
great that
Right,
we're having
right,
these
right,
discussions. So, and
But in closing, I want to thank you for having the show and the excellent information, and thank you, and stay safe and stay well.
All right, thank you, Ben.
thanks for calling in.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, whichever way the vote goes, it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. Other than the fact that I'm a history guy, and I'd like to see the history put out, and I'd like to see us get recognition nationally as a one little area like we are. But hey, if it doesn't, I don't want to hear people cry after, oh, we could have had the state park, we could have had the federal park here. No, we could have, but you voted it no.
Well, and
So-
like we said, and first off, I want to thank you, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here, is, the work that you've done and other folks have done to get it this far. Whether people are in favor of it or not, the fact that people are having discussion about Whitensville and being an important place, being a significant place, that alone is a great discussion that we're having
Right.
here. And so,
But if we don't make an emphasis of it, one day our kids aren't gonna know this. You've got future generations won't even know what exists, especially in Northbridge now. I grew up with the White Machine Works, but people moving into town now don't know anything about it, don't know what that big mill was, because nobody was around. They weren't around. They lived elsewhere. They moved into the area. Their children don't know. This is a way of getting out the history of the town.
right, and as we were saying before, I would ask that people think about just one thing as we're having this discussion is, again, this isn't a Northbridge story. This isn't a Whitensville story.
Right.
It's an American
It's
story.
an American story.
It's an American story, and what the study, and we brought in scholars from around the country, experts in industrial history, American history, and they're the folks who decided. Again, it wasn't just me taking a pencil and going, I like Whitensville. It was people coming here and proving that this is one of the crown jewels of the
You
Blackstone
think
Valley
about it.
story.
One of the reasons that this valley grew into a huge textile manufacturing area, one was the rivers, but number two was the fact that the machinery they needed was being built right here.
Right. It's
And
absolutely
transportation wasn't easy back then.
right. Absolutely.
We gotta go, Kevin. We're getting
Hey,
this
look
thing-
at that! We blew through an hour.
Thank you for tuning in, and next week we're gonna be coming on at 8 o'clock, because I have an appointment up until 8 o'clock next week, so we'll be on an hour late. Thank you for coming in,
Oh,
Kevin.
pleasure's always. Pleasure's
See you
always.
next week.